Hi, welcome to another episode of The Scoop today. I keep reading and hearing all this talk about Harvard. The president wants to pull federal funding from Harvard because they, kind of simply put, they are, he, he feels that Harvard should be condemning some of the behavior from some of the students that are harassing Jewish students. And I've seen some interviews of Jewish students who say they cannot freely walk around campus. They're harassed, they're stopped, they're harassed. And like the one young man that I saw an interview with about a week ago said, that unfortunately sometimes some of the Jewish students are easy to identify. I think some of them, if they're traditional, might wear their, I don't know what it's called, their the little cap thing that they wear. So he was like, we can be easy to identify, so they're easy targets, and so the president wants the college to tell the student body and the president of the college, like they don't want to say that, and they're saying freedom of speech. But and I get that, but when you have part of your student body that feels unsafe walking around campus, and they're paying mega dollars to go to college there, you cannot encourage them to just stay in your dorm room and do your classes remotely. That's that's not acceptable. That's not an acceptable solution when you are paying, you know, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to go to a prestigious school. You should not feel unsafe walking around campus, and you should not be told because of your religious beliefs that you should just stay in your dorm room and take your classes in your in your bedroom. That's crap. So I like, so part of me understands where the, the president our president is coming from, but I it's a tough one. So he wants to pull federal funding, which is a little over $2 billion. Excuse me. So I did a little bit of research, and because you keep hearing that people are saying, well, the college has an enormous endowment fund, and why they can just use that money to make up for the loss of federal funding if they're going to dig their heels in and not tell students, listen, you can't pick a religion and harass them and block them from walking around the campus and getting to their classes. So that was the research that I was trying to do, was what's going on with this endowment fund. And I made some notes. So if I look down, it's just because I made some notes and I wrote some numbers down, and I just want to make sure that I relay them right. So as of the end of 2024, their endowment fund has $53 billion in it. It is the largest endowment fund in the world. But there's rules around when the colleges can use endowment funds. And I would tend to think that it's any college that kind of has these rules in place. Like they can't just go, withdraw the money for like whatever they want. However, they colleges, so the rule is 80% of the endowment fund is hit restricted use, but that still leaves 20% that they couldn't use in a situation that's considered an emergency. So that's still a significant amount of money, 20% of $53 billion. Like that should be enough to tide you over. So Harvard has a $6.9 billion operating budget. And so their unrestricted endowment ends up being $16.5 billion. So the $16.5 billion of unrestricted endowment covers over 2 years of their $6.9 billion operating budget. I guess depending on how you look at it, the the freezing of the federal funding could be considered an emergency. Although, you kind of have to wonder, are they, one would assume that they're turning a profit. So don't you have, money after you pay your college professors, like what's left over is their cushion, like our savings account, I guess is how I look at it. Like, do you sock a little bit of money away in your savings account that wouldn't necessarily be from pulling from the endowment, but it would be pulling from like a reserve, like locally, I hear, like the school districts, they want to make improvements. And so, they say, this is what we want to do. Like, for example, in the school district that I lived in a few years ago, they wanted to purchase new buses and they saved money from the taxes that they collected. And then they said, we want to buy these new buses. We saved up enough money to do it, so there's not going to be any expense to, it's not going to affect the budget. We're not asking for more money from the taxpayers for the school district. So that's what I'm thinking when I say, how much money does Harvard have, in their savings account that they can fall back on that if they need to. Of course, it's not a long-term solution, but like they could fix this pretty easily, I think. Um, so there was a business professor from the Eastern Michigan University, and he kind of like studies. Uh, he does some audits of college finances, and he was saying that Harvard really can afford a substantial hit to their endowment and still be okay. The reserves are there for dealing with finance issues, reduced enrollment, any funding issues, maybe if they have a dip in enrollment, stuff like that. There's no need for the school to make budget cuts. I think that they're having this knee jerk reaction. You don't need to make budget cuts. I think just like anything else, are you spending other money frivolously or use this, backup money that you have to cover until you can, figure out what you're going to do? What's the point of having a reserve if you're not going to use it when you can use it. And it just seems like this would be a situation where you can use it. So fall back on that. Like, what's the point of having money just sit there building up and then they have the largest endowment in the world and it's just money just sitting there? Like, that's stupid. I don't understand the 80% that's restricted, and I didn't really look too much into that. I was really just focused on why people are calling for the college to use the endowment money. Can they, how much do they have? It would be temporary, you know. I mean, in my opinion, their unrestricted endowment of $16 billion should hold them over for a while. And like I said, if they have a $6.9 billion budget, well, seven plus seven is 14. So if they have 16 billion in unrestricted and they need 2 years of operating expenses, you have that in that unrestricted endowment. 2 years should be, enough time for you to figure out what you want to do. And I'm sure it's not simple, but all they need to do is come out and say, we don't support the targeting of our Jewish student base. So, as I was reading, like, they do have some of their donors who are willing to give more. But like, if these donors are giving more and it's just sitting there in their endowment, then what's the purpose of giving more if the school's not going to use it? That doesn't make any sense to me. So the school's unwillingness to condemn the anti-Jewish behavior. I know, what was it, a year or two ago, when all of this first started, I did hear that a lot of the Jewish alumni and mega donors stopped making donations. They were pissed off that, the school where they went to school is allowing this behavior against their religion. So I don't know if any of, these Jewish donors, the alumni, did they start, like, did they stop sending money, donations, and now they're sending back? I mean, I would tend to think not, if this is still an ongoing issue. And I would also be interested to know, has their Jewish enrollment dipped? I guess if I was getting ready to go to college and I knew that I potentially could face harassment and potentially, like, be in danger, it would make me think twice and probably not choose that as my college. So I would assume that their Jewish enrollment is probably down. Does that matter to them? Probably not, because whatever, they've got so many applicants that it doesn't matter to them if they lose a demographic, because they can just fill that student with a different applicant. So it is interesting. But and I understand the calls for the college to use their endowment to put them through. I also, heard that the president wants to pull their tax exempt status. And at first I thought that that was a good idea, but then I was listening to the news, and one of the morning show hosts said you have to be careful with that because there has been talk before in calling for there to be the Catholic Church, I think, to lose their tax exempt status. So the Democrats wanted to pull the tax exempt status from the church, and it's always pushed back again. So if the Republican side wants to pull, do this, like you have to be careful. Like they say, be careful what you wish for, because someday the role could be reversed, the tide could be reversed. And I have said that many times over other situations. You have to be careful what you wish for, because eventually it something is going to come that's going to turn that and it gets used against you. So that comment definitely gave me pause to think, well, maybe pulling their tax exempt status might not be a good idea, because then that opens up the door for other tax exempt statuses to be looked at and reversed. So, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that Harvard will, uh, reverse their hesitancy to say, you know, you can't do this? Um, is it, like at what point does the school say it's not worth it to protect the agitators, if they're losing enrollment or they're losing donors from, like big money from alumni? Um, will they cave into the pressure? I think I don't even want to say cave into the pressure. It's the right thing to do. No person should walk around anywhere, their job, their school. No person should feel like they are going to be a target just because of their religion, who they voted for, like whatever. It's the right thing to do to say, I may not agree with you, your religion, your stance, your whatever, but like you just can't say, oh well, whatever, I'm not gonna, say anything. Like, so I don't know. I just think it's the right thing to do for the school to say that behavior is not going to be tolerated. So let me know in the comments, like, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think that it's a violation of freedom of speech and students should be able to block their, part of the student body from moving around campus and getting to classes? Do you agree that the school should just tell them, if you don't feel safe walking around the campus, then stay in your dorm room and do your classes remotely? And if you think that, like, share why. Uh, you know, I'd like to learn other points of view. Is there something that I'm not thinking about or considering, that would make that, like, you know, make sense or be a good solution? As always, if you comment, be respectful to others and me. We are all human beings, and we should not be bullies towards each other. It's easy to be a keyboard warrior, um, but be respectful, in whatever comment, or if you're replying to somebody else, just be nice. There's enough mean going around. We don't need to pile on. See you next time.